She was meant to die in chains until a human broke the rules for her asterisk. The alien warrior girl was marched through the center of the city, chains tight around her neck and wrists. Crowds of aliens stood on both sides, throwing dust, stones, and curses at her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only looked ahead with tired eyes. Eyes that were once proud, but now full of pain and silence. Her name was Valera. And once, she had led armies. Now, she was nothing more than a prisoner, a traitor in the eyes of her people. Waiting to die, up above, standing quietly on a platform. A human soldier watched the scene unfold. His name was Daniel. And he had just arrived from Earth as part of a peacekeeping program between humans and the alien empire. This was not what he expected. He had heard stories of how aliens treated their criminals. But this was worse than anything he imagined. The crowd didn't just want her punished, they wanted her erased. The guards pulled her forward, and one of them shouted, "By the order of the High Council, Valera is to be executed at dawn for treason and cowardice in battle." Daniel narrowed. His eyes, treason, cowardice. He had read the battle report, said she refused to fire on a rebel base. Even when ordered, the base was full of civilians, mostly women and children, and for that, she was going to die. Something twisted inside Daniel's chest. He didn't know her, had never spoken to her, but there was something in her expression. Something that haunted him. She didn't look like a traitor. She looked like someone who had made a choice, one that cost her everything. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His quarters were warm, safe, but his mind was filled with her face, her eyes, her silence. He finally stood up, dressed in his black uniform, and quietly left his room. Security was light after all. No one expected a human guest to sneak into the prison block, but Daniel had been trained for infiltration. He moved through the shadows, disabling cameras one by one, avoiding patrols. The prison was cold, made of black stone and energy fields. At the very bottom level, past the worst of the criminals, was her cell. He stood there for a moment, watching her through the force field. She was sitting in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees. Head down. He tapped lightly on the wall. She didn't. "Look up. I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. She raised her head slowly, her face pale and bruised. Her eyes met his, confused. "Tired but not broken. You're human," she said, her voice dry and cracked like desert wind. "Yes," he answered. "I saw you today at the trial. They called it a trial." She laughed bitterly. "It was only a performance." Daniel stepped closer. "Is it true? Did you refuse to attack that rebel base?" "Yes," she said, "because I saw children running outside, screaming. You were ordered to fire." "I know," she said, "but sometimes orders are wrong." Daniel felt something heavy press on his chest. He believed her every word. Every look, nothing about her felt like a lie. "They'll kill you for it," he said. "And no one will ever know why you really did it." She didn't reply. She just stared at the wall, her expression blank again. "Let me help," he whispered. "I can get you out of here." "You'd be a traitor too," she said softly. "Your people will turn on you." "I don't care," he said. "I won't let them kill someone for doing the right thing." Silence filled the cell. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she looked at him and said, "Why?" He took a slow breath. "Because I've seen too many good people die for following orders." A soft alarm beeped from his watchguards. "We're shifting soon." He had to leave. "For now, I'll come back tomorrow night," he said. "Be ready." She didn't nod, didn't smile. But as he turned to go, her voice followed him like a whisper. "Thank you, human." As Daniel slipped back into the night, one thought stayed in his mind. He did this. There would be no turning back, no forgiveness, no return to Earth. But something deep inside had already decided he was going to save her. even if it cost him everything. Smoke hung in the air as the night turned darker, but Daniel's heart beat louder than his footsteps as he crept through the stone corridors. Again, he had already broken a dozen rules the night before. But this time, it felt heavier. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every corner felt like a trap. The silence around the prison was unnatural tonight. Like the walls themselves were listening, he reached her cell. But something was wrong. Valera was not sitting in the corner this time. She was standing, awake, staring straight at him through the energy field. "Our chains tighter than before. You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice calm but sad. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I said I would." "I didn't think you were that stupid," she said, her lips almost forming a smile, though her eyes didn't, before he could speak. She raised her cuffed hands, revealing deep, fresh burns where the chains had been heated. "They punished me," she said, "for talking to you last night." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Who did this?" She didn't answer, just turned away, her back showing more bruises he hadn't seen before. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to speak, the rage building quietly inside him. He had seen war, had seen cruelty, but never something so quiet. "And personal, I have a plan," he said, shaking off the anger. "But I need answers first." Valera turned back slowly. "What kind of answers?" "The truth," Daniel said. "Why did your own army turn on you?" "I read the official report, but it's just paper." Valera looked at the floor, her voice soft. "Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." Daniel waited, saying nothing. "They claimed the rebel camp was full of weapons," she said. "But when I scanned it, there were only civilians. No weapons, no fighters. Only families hiding underground. You reported it." Daniel asked. "Yes." She nodded slowly, "and I was ordered to erase them anyway." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "So you refused?" "I refused to fire," she said. "But another squad took my place and did it anyway." A long silence followed. Then she added, "Later, they said I disobeyed and spread lies. So they arrested me." Daniel felt cold inside, colder than the prison air around him. He believed her, he didn't need proof anymore. Her voice held more truth than any file ever could. "We'll escape tomorrow," he said firmly. "I've marked a route, but you have to trust me." Valera looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. "If you're caught, your people will call you a traitor." "I'd rather be a traitor than a coward," he replied. "Will you come?" Valera didn't answer at once, but slowly she nodded. Daniel turned to leave, but suddenly, red lights blinked along the hallway. An alarm had been triggered. Someone knew he was here. Valera's eyes widened. Go, now, but it was too late. Footsteps thundered from both ends of the corridor. Daniel backed away as the energy field locked tighter around her cell, and guards rushed in from the shadows. One of them shouted, "There! The human! He's with the prisoner!" Daniel ran, but not before hearing Valera's voice behind him, shouting, "Run! Don't stop!" His legs carried him through side tunnels, past doors that slammed shut behind him. His lungs burned, but he kept moving, dodging searchlights, jumping over cables and crates, somehow. He reached the outside wall and used his clearance to escape into the darkness. He didn't stop running until he reached his quarters, locking the door behind him, his chest heaving. The warning had been clear. Someone had seen him. Someone had sounded the alarm as he leaned against the wall. Catching his breath, a soft beep echoed from his communicator. A new message, marked in red, blinked on the screen. Human Officer Daniel report to military court at dawn. He stared at the message, heart sinking. They knew. And the game had changed, not just for Valera, but for him too. There was no turning back now. Either they escaped together tomorrow night, or they would both be buried in this alien land. Daniel looked up at the stars through the small window. He had one day left, and everything was falling apart. The rain fell hard, soaking Daniel's uniform as he stood alone in the dark alley behind the military court building. He wasn't supposed to be here, not after the warning, not after the alarm last night, but he couldn't walk into that courtroom and lie, not while Valera was still chained beneath stone walls. So instead of reporting in, he waited for the sky to turn black again. His heart raced with every minute that passed. Knowing the clock was ticking inside his jacket, he held a stolen security card, something he'd risked everything to get. The plan was simple: on paper cut the power, unlock her cell, and escape through the service tunnels under the city. But in real life, nothing was simple, especially when the whole planet was watching him now. Every screen across the alien capital showed his face labeled human traitor. They didn't even wait for a trial. Daniel pulled up his hood and walked toward the restricted zone, pretending to be calm, but his hands were shaking. And every guard he passed felt like a loaded weapon. He reached the maintenance door, scanned the stolen card, and stepped inside. The hallway was empty, cold, and humming with electricity. He moved fast, ducking past cameras and slipping into a narrow access shaft. Below him were miles of silent tunnels, old ones built long before the new city was formed. If he reached her cell from below, he could avoid the patrols and force fields. But he only had one chance. If he got caught this time, no one would let him walk out again. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface, Valera sat on the floor of her cell, her eyes staring at the wall, but her ears alert. She hadn't slept, not after the alarms last night. Not after the guards came and tore her room apart. They had taken her food, broken the water unit, and left her bleeding on the floor. But she didn't cry, she didn't beg, she just waited. Because Daniel had said he would return, and somehow she believed him. Suddenly, the wall behind her made a soft, mechanical noise. A panel shifted open, and Daniel's head appeared through the small gap. His face, covered in sweat and dirt. "Move back," he whispered. Pulling himself into the room, "You actually came," she said quietly, her voice dry. He walked over to her and held out a device. Placing it against the energy cuffs with a soft spark, they clicked open. Her arms dropped, weak from the weight of the chains. "We don't have time," he said, lifting her gently. "Can you walk?" "I can run," she answered, gritting her teeth together. They slipped into the tunnel he had used, closing the panel behind them. The sound of boots and alarms was already echoing down the corridors above. Daniel led her through the darkness, their steps fast and quiet. Every turn of the tunnel felt like a gamble. Left meant safety, right could mean death. Valera began to slow, her wounds reopening, her breathing rough. Daniel stopped and wrapped an arm around her waist. "We're almost there. Don't lie to me," she said, coughing. "But don't stop either." They pushed forward, deeper into the old tunnels, the air turning stale and hot. Then, just ahead, light flickered from a broken panel. It was the old sewer exit, their way out. Daniel rushed toward it but froze when he saw movement. A squad of alien soldiers stood just outside the gate, waiting. In silence, weapons ready, Valera's legs gave out behind him, and he caught her before she fell. "They knew," he whispered, his voice dry with fear. She looked up at him, her voice barely a breath. "Leave me and run." "Human? No," he growled. "We didn't come this far just to give up now." He reached into his belt and pulled out the last thing he had, a smoke grenade, not meant for combat, but it would have to do. He pulled the pin and threw it into the corridor, thick gray clouds exploding instantly. "Hold on to me," he whispered, grabbing her hand and charging forward through the smoke. Blaster shots rang out, voices shouted, but he didn't stop. He slammed through the gate with her in his arms, rolling into the wet mud outside. Somehow, they had made it into the forest edge, just beyond the walls, breathing hard, bleeding, and half-conscious. Daniel looked back. They were free, but now the real hunt would begin. And from this moment on, they were no longer soldier and prisoner. They were fugitives. The ship was sleeping beneath the sand. Daniel's boots sank into the dunes as he stared at the old metal frame half buried under a broken hill. The desert wind hissed softly like a warning. And the sky above them was dark with ash and distant fire. Valera stood beside him, weak, but standing, her eyes locked on the strange shape. She didn't say anything, but he could feel her heart beating through the silence. They had followed the ancient coordinates found in her implant, a location scrubbed from modern maps, erased. From every archive, this was where her people once built ships that could disappear between stars. Ships that didn't ask for permission. Daniel climbed over a sharp ridge and slid down the other side. His hand scraped the edge of a control panel, poking through the dust. He brushed it clean, fingers trembling with hope. If this worked, they could escape the planet in hours. Valera dropped to one knee and placed her palm on the metal. Her alien markings glowed faintly as her skin met the surface. A pulse of blue light traveled through the ship's bones, and for a second, Daniel thought it was waking up, but then everything went dark again. No hum, no power. Just silence. It rejected me, she said, eyes downcast. Why? Daniel asked, confused. You're one of them, aren't you? I was, she replied. Until I disobeyed. Daniel kicked the side of the ship. Pain shooting up his leg. This ship could save us, he said. We're not making it. Far on foot, Valera looked up slowly, her voice low and bitter. These old ships were built with loyalty locks, she said. They read your soul, not just your code, and mine is no longer clean. Daniel stepped back and stared at the giant ship like it was a god that had turned its back. But it read your touch, he said. For a second, it lit up. That was a memory, she replied, not a welcome. The sun began to rise. Behind them, red and cruel, they didn't have time to beg a sleeping ship to change its mind. Soldiers would find them soon. Their footprints were still fresh in the sand. Daniel opened a side panel and began tearing at wires. If it won't open the door for you, he muttered, then maybe it'll open it for me. Valera didn't stop him. She just sat in the sand and watched, her eyes far away. He connected a human tool into the old system, sparks flying across his hands. The panels screamed for a second, and then a hollow voice filled the air. Unauthorized input detected. It said, "Name your purpose." Daniel leaned in close and whispered, "Survival." The ship was silent. Then the ground rumbled, the sand around them sank slightly, and the hatch slowly opened. Inside, stale air escaped like the breath of a dead giant. Daniel turned to Valera. It worked. She didn't smile, but she stood. "You tricked it," she said. "That's a very human thing to do. You're welcome," he said with a smirk. They entered the ship, passing through narrow halls filled with blinking lights. The control room sat like a forgotten throne, dust covering every button. Valera wiped a screen clean and sat in the co-pilot seat. Daniel took the pilot chair, unfamiliar symbols glowing beneath his fingers. "This thing's old," he said. "But I think I can fly it." "You'll need to reprogram the launch core," she said, pointing to a dark crystal at the center console. "I can do that." He nodded. "But we'll only get one shot." Daniel began the sequence, fingers flying across the controls. The screen lit up with error messages. "Fuel cell 1 offline. Wings not responding. Navigation corrupted. Just great," he muttered. Valera leaned in and placed her hand over the crystal. Whispering something in her language, the ship flickered again, a deeper hum rising from the walls. Then the engines groaned like ancient beasts waking from sleep. But then the screen showed something new. Warning. Global network alert. Threat detected. Fugitive signals aboard. Valera's eyes widened. "They're tracking us," she said, through the implants. Daniel reached for his belt and pulled out a sharp tool. "Yours first," he said, holding it out. She nodded and turned her head, exposing the glowing mark behind her ear. With a deep breath, he sliced into the skin and removed the small chip. She didn't scream, only gritted her teeth. Then she took the tool and did the same for him. Both chips dropped into a containment jar. Daniel tossed it out the open hatch, far into the sand, as the door sealed. The ship finally spoke. "Pilot confirmed," it said. "Prepare for launch." They stared at each other in silence. The galaxy outside was ready to kill them, but in here, they had found something rare: control. And for the first time since this all began, they had a way out. The ship didn't move, not yet. It floated in the upper edge of the atmosphere. Hidden among cold clouds and silent static, the launch had worked, barely. And now the engines rested as the stars waited beyond the sky. Inside the cockpit, everything was quiet, except for the hum of systems and the faint sound of breathing. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, staring at a screen that showed warnings in 3 languages. They couldn't jump yet, not until the gravity stabilizers cooled. That gave them time. And time was the one thing he didn't know how to use anymore. Behind him, Valera lay on a bench wrapped in a thermal sheet, her body still sore from her wounds. She wasn't sleeping, just silent. She watched the ceiling with unreadable eyes. And for the first time since they escaped, she looked. Small Daniel stood and walked over, careful not to speak too soon. He sat beside her, not touching, just waiting. Then he said softly, "There's something I should tell you." She didn't answer, not at first. He kept his eyes on the floor. "I wasn't supposed to be at your execution," he said. "I was ordered to observe a diplomatic meeting, far from the square, but I left my post." Her head turned slightly, just enough to show she was listening. "I didn't know why I did it," he continued. "Not really. I just had this feeling something was wrong." He looked at her now, and her eyes were locked on his. "I saw the way they looked at you," he said, "like you weren't even alive anymore. And I saw the way you looked back, like you still had something left to fight for." Valera's hands gripped the blanket tightly. "You could have turned away." She said, "Let them kill me, and still gone home a hero." He nodded slowly. "I know," he said, "but I've been called a hero before." He paused, swallowing the tightness in his throat. It never felt right. She sat up slowly, eyes shining in the dim cabin light. Her voice was low, fragile. "Why does this feel different?" He breathed out, barely a whisper. "Because I didn't save a soldier." He said, "I saved a person." That's when it happened. Her face twisted. Oh, not in anger or pain, but in something deeper. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled. She turned away quickly, but not fast enough to hide the first tear that fell down her cheek. She covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook. Silent cries filled the quiet cabin, raw and unexpected. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat with her, letting the weight of everything fall with her tears. It wasn't just pain. It was everything. The betrayal, the exile, the deaths she couldn't stop. The honor stripped from her name, and maybe buried deep inside. The disbelief that someone had cared enough to see her as more than a tool. After a while she wiped her face and looked at him again. "I haven't cried since my sister died," she whispered. Daniel gave her a small, sad smile. "I cry more than I admit," he replied, "especially when I think no one's watching." She almost laughed, but it came out more like a breath. "Thank you," she said, "not as a warrior, not as a fugitive, but just as herself." They sat there, 2 broken people surrounded by stars and silence, and somewhere in that silence, something changed. The ship beeped softly, alerting them. Daniel stood and checked the console. "The stabilizers are ready," he said. "We can leave the planet now." Valera looked out the window, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Anywhere they're not expecting us," he answered. "And maybe somewhere we can find answers." She nodded, wiping her eyes one last time. "Then let's not waste it," she said. Daniel activated the launch protocol. The engines roared gently, like the breath of a sleeping beast returning to life. He glanced at her once more. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded again, but this time with strength in her voice. "I've never been more ready." The stars stretched ahead of them like a path written in fire and ice, and together they disappeared into it. No one ever entered the void willingly. From orbit, it looked like a scar across space, a dark line where the stars refused to shine. They called it the Forbidden Zone. Others called it cursed space, haunted, poisoned, lost. Daniel stared at the black stretch ahead, the stars blinking faintly around it, but inside that strip of space, everything was still. No transmissions, no signals, no movement, just silence. Valera stood behind him, her arms crossed, her face was calm, but her eyes didn't blink. "You're sure the archive is in there?" Daniel asked. She nodded once. "It's where they store what must never be found." He sighed, adjusting the ship's course, "And it's where we're going." The engine stimmed slightly as they passed the boundary, an invisible line that no one crossed and returned from. The ship shivered. Not from damage, but like it knew where it was going. The lights flickered and the comms dropped into static. "We've lost contact," Daniel said. "No backup, no eyes, no help, just the two of us." Valera replied, stepping closer. He glanced at her and smiled. "Guess that's nothing new." As the ship moved deeper, strange things began to happen. The nav systems spun in circles, unable to lock direction. Time itself began to feel slow, as if each second stretched longer than the last. Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. There, Valera pointed. A strange structure floated ahead, massive, ancient, covered in rings of rotating debris. "It's not a station," Daniel whispered. It's alive." The ship's sensors went dead, and the lights dimmed again. Daniel brought the ship in close and docked by sight only. When the airlock connected, the ship fell completely silent. No hum, no systems. Just stillness. He and Valera stepped into the old vessel, weapons ready. The interior was cold and wide, made of black metal that pulsed faintly under their feet. Symbols glowed on the walls, Lelian, ancient, forgotten. "This is older than both our species," Valera said quietly. They moved through the corridor slowly. At the center, a round chamber opened, and in the middle of it floated a crystal sphere, suspended in energy. "That's it," she said. "That holds everything, records, plants, the list of erased names." Daniel walked toward it, reaching out slowly. But before his fingers touched it, something flickered in the shadows. A voice echoed, layered, like several people speaking at once. "Unauthorized life detected." The walls shifted, and shapes stepped out, machines, not fully alive, but aware, tall, thin, with glowing arms and blade-like legs. Defense units programmed long ago to kill anything that touched the truth. "Run?" Daniel asked quickly. Valera's eyes narrowed. "No," she replied, drawing her weapon. "Fight." She moved first, fast and sharp, blades clashing with metal limbs. Daniel fired from the side, covering her. They moved like they had trained together all their lives, one blocking, one striking, one rolling beneath a mechanical leg while the other shot the weak point. The machines didn't scream, didn't hesitate. They just kept coming. But the two fugitives stood their ground. And slowly, they broke through. One by one, the machines fell, sparks flying, limbs twisting, until the last one crashed to the ground. Twitching, the room fell silent again. Only the crystal remained, untouched, waiting, breathing hard. Daniel stepped forward once more. He placed his hand on the energy field, and it shimmered. The crystal floated toward him, glowing brighter. A small slit opened, and a data chip formed in his hand. He turned back to Valera. "We have it," he said. "Proof they erased you. Proof they erased hundreds." She looked at the chip, her hands trembling. "I thought I'd never see it," she whispered. "I thought it was gone forever." He placed it gently in her hands. "Now we show the galaxy who the real traitors are." But before they could return to the ship, a final warning lit the walls in red. "Exit denied," the system said. "Presence." Detected beyond the gate, Daniel ran to the control screen. On it, a ship hovered outside, the same model used by elite hunters. "They followed us," he said. "They knew where we were going." Valera's hands tightened around the chip. "They won't stop until this never existed," she said. Daniel looked at her and nodded. "Then we make sure the whole universe sees it first." The truth was burning in his hand. Daniel stared at the data chip, glowing softly like a dying star. It was warm, pulsing, alive. Inside it were names, memories, betrayal's proof that could shatter governments and change everything. Outside, a Hunter-class warship hovered like a blade over their heads. The alien vessel had already sent one warning. "Power down your engines and surrender the fugitive." The voice crackled. "No harm will come if you cooperate." But Daniel knew better. They had come to erase, not negotiate. Valera stood at his side, her expression cold but calm. Her fingers were wrapped around the railing. Her breathing slow. "Give it to me," she said. Her voice low. "I'll run, you transmit." "No." Daniel replied, "They're here for both of us." He looked at the console in front of him, his fingers hovering over the command. "This signal, if I push it, goes everywhere," he said. "All networks. All screens, all systems." Valera nodded. "Do it," she said. Daniel paused. His eyes fixed on her. "They'll come for us even faster," he whispered. "I know," she replied. "Do it anyway." He pressed the button, a low hum passed. Through the ship, the transmission began to spread, first across the nearest satellites, then to orbit towers, then deep into the galactic network. Every screen blinked, paused, and played a single message. A general shaking hands with an alien officer. Words recorded in secret. "Sacrifice the hybrids." The list of names scrolling, Valera's trial shown uncut. The decision made before she even stood to speak. Across the stars, commanders gasped. Families cried. Soldiers froze mid-march. It was undeniable, the truth, raw and alive. But inside the ship, alarms rang, weapons locked. The enemy's voice boomed, "Stand down or be destroyed." Daniel looked at Valera one last time. "You don't have to stay," he said. Her eyes locked on his. Firm as stone. "Yes, I do," she said. "You were the first person who saw Manat as a weapon, not as a problem, just as me." She walked closer. Stood with him at the controls. "If we die as truth-tellers." She said. He smiled. Not from joy, but from something stronger, peace. A light flared outside the window. The enemy ship powered up its main cannon. One blast would tear through them in seconds. Daniel placed his hand on the throttle. "We go down fighting," he said. Then something unexpected happened. The hunter ship hesitated. Its cannon turned slightly. Another signal cut through the static. "Stand down," came a new voice, deep and commanding. A second ship appeared behind the Hunter one, bearing the flags of the Allied Peace Council. They had seen the broadcast. They had come. The Hunter ship tried to flee. But 3 more vessels arrived, surrounding it. Orders were given, weapons lowered, the enemy ship surrendered. Caught in the open for all to see, inside the cockpit. Daniel and Valera stared at the screen in silence. The transmission had worked. The truth had landed. Daniel turned to her slowly. "We're not fugitives anymore," he said. We're witnesses, she replied. He sat back, breathing deep. His body still felt heavy from days of running, hiding, bleeding, but something inside him felt light. Valera looked out the window. Watching the enemy ship being boarded, her voice was quiet now. I never imagined living past that stage, she said. The execution post. He reached out and touched her hand gently. You weren't supposed to die there, he said. You were meant for this? She smiled, small, but real. I believe you now, she whispered. They sat side by side as their ship was guided into orbit. Messages flooded in from commanders, officers, even civilians. Some offered protection, some offered apologies, and some simply said, "Thank you, Daniel." Ignored the formal messages and watched her instead. Valera, once forgotten. Now remembered, not as a traitor, but as a warrior who stood when others bowed. And as the one he chose to save when no one else would. She turned to him, her voice calm. What now? Daniel grinned. Now? He said, we live. And for the first time in forever, they both believed it.